Welcome, folks, to episode number 50 of the No Conference for Old Men podcast where three old guys are talking Houston Cougars basketball with a bit of Big 12 coverage added in as well, and proud members of the GoCoogs.com network, the undisputed number one Houston Cougars content provider. We're here today again with all three of the old men, Tom Lydiak, former coach, Bill Walker, former player, and myself, Steve Chang, analytics guy for this episode. Guys, the Cougars are back in the Final Four for the seventh time in program history, fighting past Purdue in basically a road game in Indy, ending with the most exquisite baseline inbound play to win 62-60, and then following up with a much anticipated matchup versus Tennessee with a thorough beatdown of the Volunteers 69-50, where they appeared rushed and confused by our relentless and physical D. Coogs now advanced to yet another Final Four, and this time it's in our own backyard of San Antonio, Texas, where we're expected to paint the town red in flipping the dynamic we experienced in the Midwest Regional. And guys, you couldn't script it any better with a rematch of last year's Sweet 16 matchup versus Duke awaiting. Though it's our Houston program's seventh trip to the Final Four, which puts us in the top 10 of all programs, tied with Louisville. As we said last week, these three old men will never take this type of success for granted. And we're hoping number 7 is the lucky number that will bring us our first national championship next weekend. So we'll obviously focus on summarizing the two big wins and then quickly pivot to some detailed analysis of the upcoming Duke game. Then we'll close out on how potential matchups versus Auburn or Florida look should we make the national championship game. So let's get into it, guys. In dissecting our two wins over Purdue and Tennessee, really two completely different dynamics between the games. Obviously, a very offensively oriented team in Purdue first, though I will admit I was surprised at how well they competed on the defensive side of things. And then the expected heavyweight defensive battle against Tennessee that proved to be anything but, with Houston shutting down the Volunteers and us really being able to run our sets without deviation on the other side of the ball as well. Let's start with you first, Tom. What were some of the things you saw from a coach's perspective in our road win over the Boilermakers?
Well, first off, road game is absolutely correct. I don't know what the NCAA is thinking when they have a number one seed playing basically a road game 65 miles from the Purdue campus, but it didn't seem to bother Coach Sampson or the players because I think we're undefeated on the road anyway. So it's almost like us against the world, Houston versus everybody mentality. Purdue gave us maybe Gonzaga, but Purdue, who would have thought Purdue probably gave us the toughest game of the tournament? I never would have thought that there was a little more toughness in the Purdue team than I thought they had. They started a guy named Fletcher. I mean, how tough can you be when you have a name like Fletcher? Sounds like some guy that works for Wall Street or something. Milos had a really good shooting game, 6 for 9 on threes, 22 points, 6 assists. JoJo was limited to 15 minutes because of 4 fouls. Juwan kind of had a sneaky 12-rebound game. Emmanuel, 17 points. LJ had a rough shooting night. He had a lot of open looks. They just weren't going down. 2 for 13. But the key for LJ is that when we needed a bucket, he got it. Let's see, there was like 3:38 left in the game. We came out from a timeout, and score was 57-55. And we ran, I don't know if it was a play or not or just part of our offense, but JVA sets a flare screen for LJ. Their freshman defender, CJ Cox, was just a step slow. And what he did was, instead of getting in LJ's hip pocket so he doesn't get screened, he went underneath about 1 foot, and that was just enough for JVA to catch him. And then Milos delivered a really good pass. LJ hits it in stride, and we're up by 5. That was a key point in the game. JVA, very, very solid. A game off the bench, 8 points, 5 rebounds. But the big story, as everybody knows, is the baseline out of bounds play, the BLOB, with the game tied up. I've only watched it about 40 times. I don't know how much you guys have watched it, but
I'm about the same.
And then I went back and I went frame by frame. I read some comments, on Twitter, whatever, from some of the coaches. And the play, Milos brought it in. Braden Smith was guarding him. Juwan broke out to the corner on the ball side corner. You had LJ on the ball side elbow, and he set a screen for Emmanuel, who was on the other elbow, the weak side elbow, and Emmanuel was actually the first option coming off that. Kelvin mentioned that in his interview. And then the second option is the old screen to screener play. JoJo, who was on the backside block, comes up and sets a screen for LJ, and LJ was going to be the second option on the weak side baseline there. And then the third option was JoJo rolling to the basket. Well, Purdue actually sent like three guys to LJ because Kaufman Wren was guarding JoJo. He came off JoJo and helped a little bit on LJ, and that was just enough for JoJo to roll to the basket and get open. If JoJo wasn't open, then we wouldn't have that finish that Milos had. Braden Smith, who's guarding Milos, he did what's called a peel switch, and he left Milos and went looking for LJ. And then because JoJo was able to get the ball, there was nobody guarding Milos. And I don't know about you guys, but there was a millisecond when JoJo caught the ball, I thought he was shooting it. And then when he dumped it to Milos, I was like,
beautiful.
Oh, crap. Yeah. That was, and I'm not sure if that was designed to go back to Milos, if we had scouted. But the bottom line is that if JoJo doesn't get open, he can't make that pass.
Yeah.
And Kaufman Wren helped off just a little bit, and enough for JoJo to roll right to the basket. And I'm happy for Coach Sampson because that play was all over social media, and it was like what some people were saying, that's got to be the best play ever designed in March Madness, blah, 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 and all that. And Kelvin rarely, from a lot of people, doesn't get credit for his X's and O acumen. People just say, he just goes out there and they just play harder than everybody else, and they foul the shit out of people and blah, 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 and all this. But I thought it was great for Kelvin, on the big stage there to get his flowers or whatever for that awesome play. We'll be seeing that play on March Madness for years to come. Kind of like the Lorenzo Charles thing. That's kind of in the dustbin now, but maybe we'll get to see this game winner, for years to come.
Yeah, hopefully. Bill, how about your views of the big Sweet 16 win from a player's perspective?
Yeah, a lot of repeating what was just said by Tom. Essentially, home game for Purdue. West Lafayette is about an hour drive from Indy, and not only that, but every single Kentucky and Tennessee fan who attended the game were certainly behind Purdue. So, yeah, this was. And Kentucky lost the game, so they weren't going to hang around to see the regional final. So they started selling all their tickets to Purdue fans who couldn't get tickets initially. Yeah, it absolutely was a Purdue home game. But the thing is, I was never as I guess maybe I would have been a little more concerned had I valued Purdue or rated Purdue a little more highly going in. I thought it was going to be a 12, 14 point win. So I thought, what, we're great on the road. Purdue's not that good. They're not going to be able to compete with us athletically. They're not as aggressive. And so it never really bothered me. And I thought, we're not the first team to encounter this. I mean, had Louisville held up their end of the deal versus Creighton in the first round, Auburn, the 1 seed, and this would have been a second round game, would have played Louisville in Lexington. And, it happens. Of course, it happened to us when previously, but when we had to play an 8-9 game against Auburn in Birmingham. So it'd be nice if it would stop happening to us. But you know what? We've proven that we're going to beat anyone anywhere. And, that's fine. Just unfortunately bad geography for us. But, and I made this note during the game, we're going to make up for it when we're playing for the title in San Antonio, which you mentioned, Steve. And yeah, I'll give Purdue and Matt Painter a ton of credit. Purdue played their game. They hit shots when they needed to. They defended extraordinarily well.
Shockingly
and
well.
they hung right in until the bitter end. Now, did they get some help? Absolutely. Had the official been in a position to make the correct call, Kaufman-Renn should have picked up an early second foul and been out for the half. Instead, Arsenault got called for a bogus charge, aka Drexler having his knees bear hugged by Terry Gannon in the '83 championship game. This blown call with Arsenault and Kaufman-Renn, it certainly altered the entire first half because Kaufman-Renn would have been out with 2 fouls and possibly affected the remainder of the game. And that was the one out of sort of odd calls in this game, but that was the one that I just thought above and beyond the others was because it was so early and it would have been Kaufman-Renn's second foul. To make matters worse, and I'm referring to the first half, 3/5 of our starters were kind of absent on the offensive end. We shot 30% from the field, but if you take away Uzan, we shot 23.8% from the field and 11% from three. Cryer was 0 of 6 in the first half, 0 of 3 from three. Sharp was 1 of 5, all of which were threes. Roberts, I believe, had either 2 or 3 points. Fortunately, we had the best player on the court. Uzan was 4 of 9 from the field, 4 of 6 from three, scored 12 points. Javier, as you'd mentioned, also stepped up with 4 points and 4 boards in the first half. And we were down 31-29 at halftime. Second half, we shot better. Uzan remained great, and Sharp really came to life. And in our preview of this game, I mentioned that Sharp should have a big game versus Purdue's guards. And in the second half, he made me look a little less stupid. Jawan, while really no particular threat in this game offensively, dominated the boards, as did the entire team. He grabbed 12, 5 of which were offensive, and kicked the ball back out after those rebounds for 3 assists. The team out-rebounded Purdue 38-29. Really looked like we had in the second half, we had the game put away a few times. But again, I'm going to give Purdue a ton of credit. They hit shots late. They hit them when they needed to. Their Big Ten Player of the Year, Braden Smith, who looks more to me like an Amish lumberjack, assisted on every single shot that they made in the second half, which was 11 shots, 11 assists. He finished with 15 for the game. He played all 40 minutes, which he typically does. If we get down to the final, not the final seconds, but maybe the final 20, 30 seconds of the game, they're down 3, and Smith hits Camden Heide, who hit a tough corner 3 over a quickly closing Tugler. It ties the game at 60. We miss a shot and we get the ball back with 2.8 seconds left. And Tom, you went through everything. By the way, that last option involving Tugler absolutely was for Tugler to go up with the ball.
Yes, it was.
It was not for him to dish it back to Milos. And so I've got to give Tugler all the credit in the world for being aware enough to make that pass, and give a ton of credit to Uzan for, you don't want to be, he couldn't be slow or else they could react back to him, but he's also got to be quick to establish himself in bounds before he gets that ball and goes up with it and ends the game. I heard a lot of people complaining about, particularly about Smith, for flashing out toward LJ. And this is a play that defensively that Purdue runs quite a bit, and they've run it successfully where Smith has deflected passes, they've intercepted passes. It's a defensive play that Michigan State and Purdue run quite a bit in the Big Ten, and both have had success running it. What was huge, and Tom, you mentioned it, was the fact that Kaufman-Renn was just not quick to get back and Tugler beat him to the spot.
I think he overhelped Bill, and maybe there was a communication thing between Smith and Kaufman and Wren, because Smith probably, we don't hear what's on the court, or anything like that, but there comes a point where Smith is going to tell Wren to get back to his man, and I don't know. It was, I'm I'm just glad JoJo was able to get the ball.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this was drawn up for, if it came to that, for Tugler to get the ball and go right up with it. I mean, there's only 2.8 seconds left. So for him to have the presence of mind to get the ball, to recognize that Smith has flared out and left Uzan, that Uzan is being not guarded, undefended, unguarded, and getting him the ball. I mean, brilliant from Tugler. Again, a brilliant play call by Calvin. Absolutely confirming his basketball intellect, and made the play. Game over, 62-60.
Yeah, incredible.
I will say one thing real quickly, and I don't want to take too much time on the game, but God, I saw a ton of posts where people were beside themselves wanting Cryer to be benched. And to anyone who thought that Cryer should be benched, let me just say as nicely as I can, you're an idiot.
Cryer, he delivered when it mattered.
Yeah.
Cryer consistently draws the opponent's top perimeter defender. He's always a threat from the outside, and he showed that, Tom, you mentioned it, by hitting that huge late three. He plays exceptional defense, and I'm going to get into that when we talk about Tennessee. He dished out 5 assists in the game, which was second to Uzan. And, I just, it drives me nuts. I mean, people completely ignore everything that he does. The constant threat that he is like, well, he's not shooting well, so get him off the court. Quite honestly, I hope whoever wins the bracket challenge and is on with us, I hope it's one of the people that felt strongly about that. You can come on and argue that with us, and I guess at the same time you can probably continue arguing that the earth is flat.
That reminds me of the old Scott Skiles comment about basketball's like church. Many attend, but few understand.
I mean, getting back to the game from an advanced analytics perspective, I think we all went into the game respecting Purdue, but thinking that we were just a terrible matchup for them. But Purdue came in, as you just highlighted, with a game plan to make sure Cryer was not going to beat them. So he had a tough time all game long, and they were doubling every time he touched the ball. So Purdue's, game ended up being one of those ebbs and flows type of game, and obviously was competitive till the very end. This ended up being a defensive struggle, which we would never have guessed. With a week to prepare, neither team was able to run their preferred sets easily. Both teams shot under 50% effective field goal percentage for the game. Purdue ending up under 30% from three-point range. But they paid close attention to not turning the ball over at only 12% turnovers for the game, which allowed them to keep the game within striking distance for the full 40 minutes. We made our big run in the third quartile of the game, outscoring Purdue 21-12 at that point. And where it looked like we might pull away, Purdue made a push themselves to even things up with 35 seconds to go. And then it was that magical out-of-bounds play from the baseline with 2.8 seconds to go that will go down in history as one of the biggest and most memorable plays of this tourney. Key stat of the game that made the difference for us in the end. Over 39% from us from three-point range on 23 attempts and over 42% offensive rebounds. It resulted in 9 more field goal attempts than Purdue, and we crossed over that magical 23-point attempts for the game that I highlighted as key coming into the tourney. Love the play calling. Then on to the Elite Eight game versus Tennessee. Freaking Wally Serbiak and other prognosticators like Jeff Goodman had been dogging our team, all season long, quite honestly, but also heading into the tournament. And for this game, claiming Tennessee had more quote unquote guys that could get points in a defensive struggle. Well, I guess not. Bill, you can go first. What's your player's perspective on the game versus Tennessee?
I hate to even mention his name, but I saw Zerbiak says that there's absolutely no chance that we keep the Duke game within single digits. So
yeah, he's so full of it. He's an offense. He never played D in his life. That's why he always trends that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I've watched, as you all might imagine, I've watched a ton of basketball, a ton of college basketball, and it's entirely possible that I may have witnessed as close to a perfect half of basketball as I've ever seen in the first half versus Tennessee. Did we execute as well as we could have offensively? Probably not. We shot 41.7% from the field, including a few missed layups, and 30% from three. But what made this one of the best halves of basketball I've ever seen was the defense. Uh, yeah, I talked last week about what a mediocre shooting team Tennessee is, but to hold a 75 point per game offense to 15 points is phenomenal. And that's obviously what we did. The first two notes that I took down when watching the game were specifically about Cryer and Sharp being all over UT's best players / scorers, Ziegler and Lanier. I said that we must previously mentioned that we must keep Ziegler out of the lane, and Cryer did so absolutely expertly. In fact, Ziegler ended up shooting 1 of 7 and 1 of 4 from 3 in the first half. UT's top scorer at 18 points a game, Lanier, was smothered by Sharp, absolutely smothered. And he ended up taking 9 shots. He hit 1, 0 of 6 from 3. And those two were just completely taken out of the game. As a team, UT shot 6 of 28, 21.4%, and 1 of 15 from 3 again in the first half. We out rebounded them 26-17. 9 of those boards were offensive, leading to 11 second chance points. And we committed 1 turnover and 5 fouls. Individually in the first half, Francis, playing for foul-plagued Roberts, went 2 of 2 from the field, had 6 boards and 2 blocks. Tugler pulled down 6 boards, 4 of which were offensive, and led to many of those second chance points. Wilson came in and was Wilson. 3 boards, 1 steal, 1 assist, and a block in limited minutes. And our first half offensive star, Terrence, just arose, as far as I'm concerned, kind of arose from the dead. Hit 3 of 6 shots, including 2 of 3 from 3, scored 8 points. Quite honestly, he was needed, and he definitely came through. Bottom line, just an absolutely dominant first half, 34-15 at halftime. And a half like that against Duke, and we scared the freshmen right out of the Alamo Dome. Second half, UT was a little more into, I guess you could kind of say, desperation mode. They cut the lead to 10 a couple of times, but no closer. And when they did, and when they began scrambling to double team our guards, our perimeter players, it left shooters open, and we did a brilliant job of getting the ball to Cryer, to Wilson, and especially Sharp, the Midwest region MVP. And we just made them pay. In the end, we held UT to 28.8% shooting and 17% from 3. I mean, that's just extraordinary. There were some pretty mediocre calls against Uzan, Cryer, and Tugler, leading to a 20-4 UT free throw disparity. But and Steve, I will still defy you to find evidence that the foul disparity, 16 called on us, 9 called on Tennessee, was done due to referee hatred of Calvin.
No, I didn't say Kelvin. I didn't say Kelvin.
Well,
I'd say there. I think there's a bias towards some of the other conference teams, and I don't want to get into it now. But if you total up,
I don't either. But
you total up the foul counts
but
for
we could do it
SEC
all. We
teams
could
versus
continue.
Big 12, huge discrepancy in all the matchups.
Well, again, I think a lot of it. I think that, don't get me wrong, I think there were a lot of bad calls made in this game, but I also think that, and again, Kelvin referenced or spoke to Milos early in the year and said, basically yelling at him to be aggressive and said, "We foul at U of H. We're so aggressive. We challenge every single shot. We don't allow open shots. We challenge absolutely everything. We're going to have more fouls called against us, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that to an extent. In terms of individual stat lines, I'll mention one player: 17 points, 4 assists, and 7 boards, and that was, of course, LJ. And that doesn't even take into account him locking down Ziegler. Another one, only 3 points, although the 3 were huge, but 7 rebounds and 4 assists. No surprise, Malik. And just to show that the players fully accept Calvin's defense, rebounding, protect the ball mantra. Cryer held Ziegler to 5 points for the game and 4 turnovers, whereas LJ in 38 minutes committed 0 turnovers. So for the people that think he should be benched, just wake up. Sharp, he held Lanier. Now, granted, Lanier almost scored his average. He scored 17 points. He shot 4 of 18 from the field to get there,
Yeah,
and 2 of 12 from 3. And Sharp, like Cryer, committed 0 turnovers in 31 minutes. Javier and JoJo were dominant inside with 8 and 9 boards in 15 and 25 minutes, respectively. And Uzan, while he didn't do a whole lot in terms of scoring, he was solid. He only committed 1 turnover in 34 minutes. For U of H fans wanting to buy tickets to the title game, and specifically to the title game, and fortunately I have mine, I would say make friends with the Duke fans as quickly as you can.
Nice. Hey, Tom, how about your perspective from a coach's view of the game?
First off, about the foul discrepancy, sometimes it's only human nature when one team's just like creaming the other. Just kind of start calling fouls on the team that is way ahead. It's almost like give the dog a bone, a pity call or whatever.
I agree with that as well.
It happens, but it
often,
shouldn't.
I don't know if TV plays a role in that or not, but yeah, oftentimes you want the team that's getting beaten badly to, you may subconsciously want to help them, and you make some bad calls that favor.
And talking about that first half defensive performance, that was just it was incredible. Early in the year we were holding teams to that type of score, but that was not the quality of team that Tennessee. Definitely not a 2 seed in the NCAA's. A little bit about Tennessee's offense. It was the way they run their offense. It was their worst nightmare against our defense. First off, they played 2 bigs, and those guys are just glorified screeners. They ran a lot with the NBA. They call floppy sets, where you'll have a shooter like Lanier run off a series of screens from the big man down the baseline or down screens. But yeah, the bigs, they were just basically glorified screeners. I went back and I rewatched the first half. Not once did their bigs ever roll and then post up and get the ball. They short roll a few times, but I don't know if I'm mistaken or not, but I didn't see one time where they hit where Ziegler hit the short roll or even hit one time they hit a roller who rolled all the way to the basket. I think that was Milos's fault because he didn't get there in time and they got a dunk, and then Kelvin was yelling at him to get there, but it was just a perfect storm for us and their worst nightmare. Bill, you mentioned LJ's defense on Ziegler, and I think I think maybe some of the reasons Ziegler couldn't get the ball to the bigs on like the short roll is what is he 5'10", 5'10",
Yeah,
because
5'11".
momentarily the roller would be open, but with our big, it's either JVA or it was JoJo, in his face. I just don't think he could see
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
When we play Duke, I'm not sure how tall Tyrese Proctor is if they run pick and rolls with him.
He's like
But
6'4",
we'll see.
6'5". Yeah.
Anyway, and then speaking of these screens that they set and those floppy sets, there was one where I had to play it over about 3 or 4 times because they set 2 screens on a manual for Lanier. Both screens were illegal. They both just like gave a shoulder to Emmanuel, but he's so strong. He's like an ox. He just gets through those screens. And I mean, you got to give Milos, Eman, and Malik came into just a great job of getting through the screens. And then, it's a team defense. JoJo and JVA, great job when their men were setting those pin down screens. So they're coming out and they're hedging and they're helping, and then they're quick enough to get back to their man.
Yep.
And they really didn't have to worry about their man too much because they never got the ball.
Score.
So bad matchup for Tennessee, a great matchup for us. It was that first half. That was total domination. And I want to throw in Clark Kellogg's name too. I don't know if you guys recall, but when the brackets came out, he had Clemson winning our regional.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I remember.
Clemson was the 5 seed. Clemson lost the first game to McNeese State. And then in the studio before our game against Tennessee, everybody picked us, but Clark Kellogg did. He picked Tennessee to win. So, You know what, Clark? Screw you.
That's right.
That's what you get for losing to Obama in a game of horse.
When we all looked at this, and especially as we looked at it from an advanced analytics perspective for the game, we all predicted a tight one here. But you know what? We should always more heavily weigh the value of Coach Sampson on only 2 days prep. No team can be remotely ready for our level of intensity and physicality on defense with that quick of a turnaround. So this game was a blowout from the start where Tennessee was confused and frantic dealing with our ferocity from the jump, quite honestly. This was a defensive masterpiece, as you had highlighted, Bill and Tom, by Coach Sampson, in taking away everything that they like to run on offense. They ended up an anemic 33.65% effective field goal percentage and under 18% from three-point range. And that number 3 defense of Tennessee, you look at our offense, we were right around all of our key numbers on the offensive side that made us the number 10 offense in the country. We were over 49% effective field goal percentage for the game, 36% from three-point range, plus 33% offensive rebound rate against the most physical SEC team around. So it was a textbook win for our program. Key stats of the game that basically showed how we suffocated Tennessee in this game. In addition to our normally stellar D, we blocked over 17% of their shots, limiting them to 10 percentage points under their normal 2-point field goal percentage, while turning the ball over on just under 9% of our own possessions. This is what we mean by suffocating our opponents. There was just no wiggle room for any mistakes for Tennessee against us, and they got crushed. And now we're off to the Final Four in San Antonio, where we can now reap some of the benefits of being close to home for this final push. Tom, why don't you go first? What's your coach's perspective on the epic upcoming rematch against Duke?
It's going to be interesting from a coaching standpoint of how we defend, the pick and roll. Malawatch, you can throw the ball up 14 feet up there, and he just gets it and he slams it. Tennessee didn't have that type of a post guy. I will say this: Cooper Flagg, he'll turn the ball over. He had 7 turnovers against Wake Forest, so I would expect us to come out there and really, really pressure him a lot on the perimeter. Knipple is an excellent player. It'll be interesting to see who we put on him. But yeah, what we do with the pick and roll is going to be interesting. If it's Cooper Flagg, he's really good at setting the screen and then doing the short roll. And then once he gets the ball about 10 feet from the basket, he can either score or he can just lob it up there for Malawatch, who slams it. Sion James, a transfer from Tulane, big, strong, physical guy.
Yeah.
And then they rounded out with the point guard, Tyrese Proctor. So that's what I think I'm going to focus on when we play defense is how we guard that pick and roll. We might just come out there and might just blitz who's ever the dribbler in the pick and roll, just blitz them and try to make some lob passes, and we can recover. Defensively, it looks like Malawach plays a little drop coverage on the pick and roll, and that's kind of right up Milos' alley. Milos can get in there and he can use that little snake dribble and do what's called a hostage dribble, where he keeps his defender on his back, and we know he has that floater.
Yeah.
So those are the things. Duke's got a lot of talent. They probably have Knipple and Flag will probably go number one. Knipple's been talked about in the top 10. Malawach probably first round. There's a lot of talent there, but they are freshmen. That's to our advantage, even though in this day and age, freshmen, a lot of times they aren't freshmen because they've been playing on those AAU circuits, Montverde Academy or whatever. So it's not like the old days, but they still are freshmen. We'll have the experience advantage.
So who are you picking? What do you think the score is going to be, Tom?
I think we win.
All right.
It's not going to be easy. Duke can, they can get on these runs, but the thing is that we're going to control tempo. We don't take quick shots. If we have a 3-on-2 or whatever, we don't go out there and fire up on a 3-on-2, which means if you miss, the ball's going back on the other end, and they got the numbers. So Kelvin's a master tactician when it comes to controlling tempo, and a lot of these points you see Duke score against other teams, they're not going to score against us. They're going to have to go against our set defense.
All right. Great analysis. How about you, Bill, from a player's perspective versus Duke?
Duke, 35-3, 1 in Ken Palm. We're 2.
Yep.
1 in offense, 4 in D. So good numbers. Late in the season, we discussed teams that could potentially beat U of H, teams that were possible threats to U of H, and teams with no chance. And if you both recall, I put Duke clearly in the no chance category. And
you still feel that way?
And well, at the beginning of the tournament, I was really pleased to see them on our side of the bracket.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I've warmed up a bit on Duke, but not to the point where I think that they can beat us, which I'll certainly get to. Duke, as I mentioned, they've lost 3 games. 2 came in the non-conference. They lost to Kentucky by 5, and they lost to Big 12 perennial giant Kansas.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that sarcastically, by 3, both on neutral courts. The one conference loss was 77-71 at Clemson. And this could be the most shocking stat of all time, where somehow the officials called 23 fouls on Duke to 12 on Clemson. Absolutely stunning. During the regular season, Duke beat Arizona by 14 on the road. They beat Auburn by 6 at home, 2 mutual opponents. In the tournament, they rolled. They beat Baylor by 23. They beat Arizona by 7, although Arizona scored 93 against them. And they just destroyed Alabama 85-65. They're playing very well. They have momentum. Happily, it all ends for them on Saturday night. And this is a big team. They shoot the ball well, 49% from the field, 38% from 3. They move the ball well, averaging 17 assists per game. And they only turn the ball over 9.5 times per game, not too dissimilar from us. What they aren't is an experienced team, as you mentioned, Tom. And while that's, again, as you mentioned, not nearly as important as it once was with what these kids play in and the teams they play on heading into college, it does matter, and it will adversely affect Duke versus us. Next, and I've said this over and over and over, they have emerged from the worst Power 5 conference imaginable, and in a conference that was probably worse than some non-Power 5 conferences, certainly the Big East. I think they might have even been worse than, who knows, the Atlantic 10, the Mid-American, the Mountain West. The ACC was awful this year. Now, Duke's emerged from that, and they've played well in the tournament and beaten some good teams. So we'll see. But, I mean, the teams from the ACC that made the tournament, Clemson, as you mentioned, Tom, gone in the first round. Louisville playing in Lexington, gone in the first round. UNC, who was an absolute joke participant to begin, gone after the play-in game. And Maryland was the fifth team, and they won their opening game.
Maryland's not ACC anymore, man.
Oh, you're right. That's Big Ten. Oh my God,
we're showing our age.
I'm living in the past.
My Iowa buddy didn't claim Maryland when they lost. He said, because they're still ACC.
Jeez. Sorry.
Yeah.
God, maybe that's I'm funny. The one that needs to get off of fentanyl. I was wrong in thinking that this would be the case in terms of Duke going down to Arizona. Definitely Alabama were good wins, and to their credit, they took care of both. However, it's going to be a different story versus us and our defense. Duke's very good, don't get me wrong, but they're going up against a far hungrier, a far more athletic, aggressive, and I think a far more intelligent team. And I absolutely believe they're in trouble. Obviously, everyone's heard of Cooper Flagg, the 6'9" freshman forward. He'll be the first pick in the draft. He leads them in 5 categories: 19 points, 7.5 boards, 4 assists, a steal and a half per game. And as you mentioned, Tom, he leads them with over 2 turnovers per game. He's a 48% shooter, 37.5% from 3. He's an absolute weapon offensively, and I would imagine that Jawan will probably start out against him. You got to mention Con Knipple, of course, because he's from Milwaukee. 6'7" forward. He's their second leading scorer, 14.5 points. Shoots 40% from 3, 91% from the line. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe Sharp plays him. Maybe Uzan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The thing is, this is a big, big team. Proctor is their point guard, Tyrese Proctor. He's 6'6". He shot 41% from 3, and maybe Cryer that's playing against Proctor, despite the size advantage. Sion James, he's also 6'6". He's their next starter, and he shot 42% from 3, and that may be a matchup for, I don't know, possibly Uzan. And then Malwach, who you talked about, Tom, the 7'2" freshman center, and shoots over 71% from the floor. I would say probably 71% of those are dunks. Yeah, exactly. And obviously he'll be matched up with Tugler and or Francis. The other guys that'll see playing time for Duke: Isaiah Evans, a 6'6" freshman guard, another guard in that 6'5", 6'6" range, and another 6'5" guard, Caleb Foster. So this is a big team and a good shooting team. The height will benefit them, but we're far more athletic. I think this is a game where Terrence should get probably more minutes than he's used to playing, and he needs to step up on both ends of the court. He got yanked in the second half of the Tennessee game because he wasn't exactly sure where to be on defense. He needs to be aware of what's going on, and he needs to play well, and we're going to need him to play well on both ends. Bottom line, We're the superior coach team. As I mentioned, we're hungrier. We're more aggressive. They are, yes, they've played good teams, but they have not played good teams that play the defense we play. And it's going to be a shock to their system, just like it was with Gonzaga early on, just like it was for an entire half or more against Tennessee. And assuming this isn't an extremely tightly officiated game, which does concern me, we're simply better. 74-70.
Okay, 4-point win. Yeah,
I
it'll be
think we're
tight.
about a 5-point underdog right now.
It's already gone up to 5 points. Wow. Okay.
Well, I I heard over the weekend on I think it may have been on CBS 5.5, and then
Really?
someone in our office today told me that was correct, but it had dropped to 4.5. So I'm just gonna say it's about 5, somewhere in
It's
that
okay.
range.
I like us being the underdog in
Yeah,
this game.
I do
completely
too.
agree.
Absolutely.
It's what we want. So if you look at it from an analytics perspective, this Final Four has got 4 of the top 10 statistical teams ever since we've been tracking all of these advanced analytics. Basically, whichever team gets through this gauntlet will be able to claim to have survived the toughest route ever for a champion. And this Duke game is truly the definition of a toss-up, with KenPom having Duke number 1 and us number 2, with Duke projected to be a 2-point favorite for this game. Then you flip over to Bart Torvik, where we're number 1 and Duke is number 2, and there we're projected as a 1-point favorite. Now, Duke's number 1 in adjusted offensive efficiency and number 4 in adjusted defensive efficiency in KenPom, while we've settled in at number 10 in adjusted offensive efficiency and number 1 in adjusted defensive efficiency. So no matchup is favorable at this point, with this being clearly the toughest game so far for both teams in the tourney. Duke offensively is exceptional across the board, with almost all grains in critical metrics. Number 3 in effective field goal percentage, number 8 in 3-point percentage, number 6 from 2-point percentage, and number 18th in turnover percentage. But fortunately for us, they're also a very deliberate team on offense, ranked number 268th in tempo. So it will allow for more setting up of our D. Nothing here for Houston to really pick on from a defensive view. You've basically got to be prepared to defend anything and everything. Plus, as you guys have mentioned, Duke is also just great size across the lineup, making things that much tougher. Now on D, Duke's almost as exceptional coming in as the number 1 team at challenging every shot, with effective field goal percentage D at 44.5. They were also almost as good defending the 3 as the 2, ranking 30th and number 3 respectively. Duke achieves these numbers focused primarily on just tough fundamental man-to-man D. So one saving grace is that they don't take as many risks trying to steal the ball or force turnovers, where they're a lowly 178th in turnover percentage D. They're also just kind of good at blocking shots inside, ranking number 93rd in block percentage. So on offense, it's really going to be about Cryer, Sharp, Uzan, and to a lesser extent, Roberts breaking down their man to score. In the 2 comps against physical Ds this season, Duke lost to, as you had mentioned, Bill, KU and Clemson. Now, granted, these were back in November and early February, but it leaves me with at least a little bit of confidence because RD is next level aggressive compared to what they've experienced so far. Based on the metrics, like I said, this is a toss-up based on KenPom and Bart Torvik, but because our D is peaking right now, we've got a week to prepare. We're also playing in Texas, and that payback angle from last year in the back of the kids' mind, I'm predicting a 68-65 3-point win for the Cougs. Now, not to jinx things, but assuming we do win this game, our potential matchup will be versus either Auburn or Florida in the championship. Now, we're running low on time, so just quickly, guys. Bill, you can go first. What's your player's perspective around that game, as well as the matchup potentially with Houston?
Well, if we play Florida, who I do not think will play, in the tournament, they barely beat UConn in the second round. They destroyed Big Ten weakling Maryland, and they got completely outplayed and somehow stole the Elite Eight matchup versus Tech. In their 4 losses, they gave up 106 points to Kentucky. They lost at at home to first-round loser Missouri. They scored only 44 points in a 20-point loss to Tennessee, and they also lost to SEC bottom feeder Georgia. I won't get into all their players and all that because of time, but their best player is Walter Clayton, a transfer a couple years ago from Iona, 6'3" guard. He plays well. Their starters are 6'3", 6'2", 6'4", 6'11", and 6'9". Very similar to us. They have a 3-guard offense. We'll match up well against that offense.
Yeah.
And I absolutely see them struggling versus our D, much like Tennessee did. Clayton is a really good player, and I imagine Cryer and also Sharp will play against him. And between those two and Wilson, I think we're just fine. This won't be as bad a win as the Tennessee win, but we're absolutely the better team in virtually all facets. 74-67 Cougs.
Okay.
If it's Auburn, I had a little more written down about Auburn, but we'll make this quick. This is who I think we meet in the title game, but unlike the first time, this one belongs to us. Auburn's biggest win of the year was against us, and that was the second game of the year. Kelvin's great at revenge games, and Uzan is night and day versus where he was in the second game of the year for us. Auburn losing 3 of their final 4 pre-NCAA games, I think, is a bit overrated, but they did lose to Tennessee in the SEC tournament, and yeah, I think I just don't think that they have the team to beat us. I think they have the team to make it to the championship game and play us. And Pettiford, who lit us up in the first game, they would have scored in the 60s in the first game if it hadn't been for Pettiford hitting shots at the end, and they beat us 74-69. He's playing extraordinarily well right now, but this team has not improved to the extent that we've improved.
Agreed.
We're gonna win. We're gonna beat Auburn in the championship, 75-69. See you all in San Antonio.
Nice. Tom, how about you from a coach's perspective on the other game?
Well, first things first, hopefully we're fortunate to get past Duke. And then if we do make the championship game, my bracket, I have Florida winning. But, when we were filling out the brackets, that was after the SEC tournament when Florida was on a roll. But they haven't played, that well like they showed in the SEC tournament. So I think Auburn's going to win the game. So I think if we beat Duke, I think we're going to face Auburn. And like Bill said, it's a revenge game. And, that was back in November. And we had November Milos back then. Now we got March Milos. Terrence was coming off the injury to his Achilles. He didn't even play the second half. That game was at the Toyota Center, and they didn't have a exercise bike or whatever where he could keep that Achilles loose. So he didn't even play the second half. And then you have to remember JVA was coming off 19 consecutive days and no practice, and he was just rusty. I remember posting on the Veer, JVA should not dribble the basket. Should not dribble. I don't care if it's one time, because he was that rusty. He was that rusty compared to how he's playing now. And,
you see that drop step he had against Tennessee? That was the thing.
It's like Uzan. He's night and day as well.
Yeah.
You see that blocked shot he had against Tennessee with his armpit?
So, and Malik's coming off some really good games too. He's got some momentum going. So I just think, Bill mentioned this, I just think we've gotten better since November, and Auburn's just kind of plateaued. You either get better or you get worse. You never stay the same. And a lot of teams will peak in like late November. And that's why you can take, games played November, you take with a grain of salt, if not the whole shaker. So it's like those games in November are like fool's gold. Don't get too excited about your team. Don't get too down on them. That's 3.5 months away from March Madness.
So you're thinking Auburn, right, in the finals?
Yeah, even though
It,
my bracket was Florida, but that was toward the end of the SEC. And another thing is, I'm not too impressed with the SEC defense. I mean, there were a lot of games in the '90s and in the hundreds that were played from supposedly tough defensive teams. I just don't think they play defense the way we do. Well, nobody plays defense the way we do.
yeah,
Chalk
completely agree.
Chalk was riding the hot hand.
And
What's
he
that?
was right. He was right to go chalk. I think
Yeah,
we made the mistake of picking
yeah.
another number
Well,
two to
I
make it.
still think I got robbed by picking Tech over Florida, but that we could discuss
Yeah.
that offline.
I mean, this Auburn Florida game is a rematch of SEC rivals. And if you look at it from an advanced analytics perspective, these teams are almost mirror images of each other. Auburn's number 4 in Ken Palm, Florida's number 3. Auburn's number 3 in adjusted offensive efficiency, while Florida's number 2. Auburn's number 8 in adjusted defensive efficiency, while Florida's number 10. Then you go down the detailed advanced analytics, and they both emphasize the same things as well across the board. I guess it's no surprise since Golden was briefly on Pearl's staff at Auburn, but the only stat that was different is that Auburn blocks more shots on D than Florida, ranking 4th in blocks percentage. I know Florida's beaten Auburn at Auburn this season already, but this is a tourney game where the stakes are different, and I believe the experience of head coaching matters here with Bruce Pearl. I also believe that having Broom on your team that can just dominate inside when things bog down in the tourney makes a huge difference as well, assuming that he's healthy. And guys, this is also projected to be a super close game where, again, on the analytics side, the experts are reflecting different results. Kim Palm has Florida winning by 1, where Bart Torvik has Auburn winning by 1. Both teams are exceptional, so I don't think it really matters who we play. But, if I had a preference, I'd pick Florida because they haven't had the experience or D yet. And like I said, the coaching factor matters with the 2-day turnaround. And I'll always go with Coach Sampson with just 2 days prep against an inexperienced head coach. In a championship game, I think how we would prepare for either team is thankfully very similar given their styles. Player-wise, I also think we match up better with Florida since I think our bigs are more athletic and physical than theirs. And I'll take our guards versus anyone's in the country, including Florida's. I believe the winner, actually, of our semi with Duke wins the national title. Either SEC team we play, I think we win by 6 points. And, I think I'm with you, Tom. As well as you, Bill. I mean, I'd also, like Tom, pick Florida in the finals. At this point, I actually think Auburn's making it to the finals. It's so
I
we'll
picked
see.
us over Auburn at the beginning, but
Yeah.
I still, even if I change my feelings toward Auburn, I just think that Calvin in a revenge game is I feel very good about that. So I want us playing Auburn.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this: if there's any young listeners out there, if we happen to beat Duke, don't automatically think we're going to win the game Monday
No.
night like we did in 1983. There was all that big buildup about our game against Louisville was the varsity game, and the NC State Georgia game was the JV game. So,
No. I don't think there's a
hopefully,
chance that
people out there don't feel that way because we got 2 big games left.
no
Tom,
way.
I thought you were going in a different direction. I thought you were going to talk about Duke coming back after losing by 30 to UNLV in I think it was 90 and then beating them in 91.
No, I mean
Yeah,
these are
that's where I
for
thought you were going with that.
these are for the best 10 teams ever, right? As far as we've collected these stats, and so I don't think there's any way we can overlook any of these 4 teams. And before we sign off here, I just wanted to highlight that we also have our new women's basketball coach, and it's a big get. Matthew Mitchell, who was the longtime head coach at Kentucky, is our new women's basketball head coach. Not sure if you guys had seen his background, but quite honestly, we could not have hired a better coach given
He's
his
a great
record.
hire.
Yeah, while at Kentucky. 3-time SEC Coach of the Year, 2 Elite Eights. Welcome, Coach Mitchell. Looking forward to catching some women's basketball games next season. So, guys, That's it for our 50th episode of the No Conference for Old Men podcast. We hope you all enjoyed it. And again, we'd really appreciate it if folks would follow, subscribe, or collect our podcast, depending on your podcast platform of choice. We're also available via the Republican Football podcast feed from the folks at Dave Campbell's Texas Football as the only basketball-centric podcast, or at the GoCoogs.com website for those that prefer to digest the content that way. We appreciate the continued support from all. Also, please give us a follow on our Twitter account, No Conference for Old Men. Thank you all again for listening. And please be on the lookout for our final in-season episode next week to download and listen as we hope to be celebrating our first national championship. Take care, everyone. Go Coogs.